And I'm Lainie Green, and I'm from the Spokane County Juvenile Court. I'm a guardian ad litem for Spokane County.
And I'm Bentle, and I come from the Eastern Band of the Cherokee Nation, and I am a mom and a sister and an auntie and a yaya and just a Velcro mom and auntie to many, many women and children out there. And I'm really honored to be with you all today in the 4th annual ICWA Institute, the wrap up. And I am a guardian ad litem and an advocate supervisor. And I have been doing this going on 39 years now, and it is a deep passion of mine. And with that, I'd like to go ahead and open up in a good way, as I have all week, and just know that I'm going to ask our Creator to open our hearts to peace and healing between all people. Creator, open our hearts to provide and protect for all children on Mother Earth. Creator, open our hearts to respect the earth and all the gifts the earth gives us. Open our hearts to end exclusion, violence, and fear among all. I thank you all for being here, and I know that between Lainie and I, this training, this wrap-up training is going to be perfect. Thank you. Oh, okay. Thank you, everyone, for indulging me in my opening in a good way. That's what I do in this ICWA Institute, and that's what I do when I'm in Indian country in meetings and such. And I think Lainie can probably attest to that, because what she didn't say was that she is a Spokane tribal member.
Yes.
Yes.
Yes. Sorry, I've gotten so used to just going off the guardian ad litem piece, but yes, I am a enrolled Spokane tribal member, born and raised on the Spokane Indian Reservation.
Yes. Thank you. So during this presentation, we are not experts. We're going to give you some generalizations. We're going to be able to share our experiences with you as it comes to living the Indian way, the American Indian way. We're going to have some really courageous conversations, I hope. I would just ask that you stay present. You speak your truth, you own your truth, you experience discomfort, because you may hear things and see things that you'll go, huh, I never thought of that. I didn't think of that. So please listen for understanding. There is no fixing. There is no, and I would just ask that you take risks during this session, and hopefully throughout this ICWA Institute, you are able to find those beautiful gems. So this is a starting point for you in working with American Indian children and families. So we will move to our agenda. Lainie, would you like to go over that for us, please?
Yes. So we will be reviewing ICWA practice, the overview of ICWA law, relative search, and Native American inquiry NAIR, LICWAC, which is Local Indian Child Welfare Advisory Committee. We will be defining the role of the advocate in an ICWA case, and we'll be discussing the tribal differences in the culture and in regards to traditions. And we will be giving thanks and gratitude for the journey.
Thank you. And so these are the 5 things that I'd like to be able to have you take away today. And that is: prepare to navigate an ICWA case, understand historic trauma, your role as an advocate in an ICWA case, understanding tribes. They have their own customs, traditions, and languages, and how to help their children. Continue to be a student. Child Welfare Act, the gold standard. Lainie, would you like to maybe expand upon the gold standard for us, please?
Yes. So why is the gold standard? So ICWA is a longstanding federal law protection for the well-being of Native children by upholding the family integrity and stability within the community. It ensures that children and families receive the services that they deserve. And research shows that children fare better when they're placed with family and within their tribal communities even. American Indian children involved in their tribal communities, cultures, ceremonies, language are linked to have lower rates of depression, alcohol use, antisocial behavior. And research also shows that there are important long-term benefits to being raised with distinct cultural identity. The children have higher self-esteem, higher educational attainment, and back to you, Lauralee.
Yes, and I think it's really important because, as David said, and he actually sent a article about the bonding and attachment within Indian culture and families. So I would read that and become familiar with it. And if you have questions, Lainie and I are here, as well as you have some really great supervisors who also have some great knowledge too. So what we're going to do is just go over some of the things that we were taught this week, you know, through David Simmons from ICWA. And you know what I forgot to do? I forgot to express my deep gratitude for my committee that has been on this journey with us for the last 4 years. And that is Lori Irwin, who presented yesterday. She is just so knowledgeable when it comes to Indian cases and the ICWA law. Casey Looney, who also presented yesterday. And I have to give shout out to Ann McAvoy, who is a silent participant in this committee, but she does such beautiful work in keeping us all in line and supporting us. And I believe if she's on this call today, and I just want to say thank you. And Lainie, thank you for the work that you do. So you'll find that I am kind of a jumper sometimes. If I remember something, then I'm going to go back to it. That's just the way I think globally. So we're going to go into the provision of the laws. And this is what David talked about, and I believe Lainie was going to do this slide for us.
Yes. So active efforts. The department shall make timely and diligent efforts to provide or procure services, including engaging the parent or parents or Indian custodian in a reasonably available and culturally appropriate preventive, remedial, and rehabilitation services. This shall include those services offered by the tribes or other Indian organizations whenever possible, because those are culturally relevant. Active efforts also means a documented, concerted, and good faith effort to facilitate the parent or Indian custodian's recipient of engagement and services. At a minimum, active efforts should include showing the court that the department provided voluntary services prior to filling the dependency petition, beyond simply providing referrals to these services. And they continue to show the court that the department actively worked in accordance with existing court orders and the individual service plan beyond simply providing referrals to such services. So they go above and beyond. Active efforts, you don't just provide, here's a list of resources to go out and for the parent to do it on their own. Active efforts means the social worker sometimes goes out and takes the parent to the services, takes them to their assessments because they don't have transportation. They need a bus pass. They drive to the parent to deliver the bus pass. They sit with them and make the calls and the appointments with them instead of opposed to just giving them a list of things to do and resources. They actually actively help them engage in those. The next one, the best interest of Indian children. The use of practices in accordance with the federal ICWA and to accomplish the following: protect the Indian child's safety, well-being, development, and stability. Prevent the unnecessary out-of-home placement of Indian children, and acknowledge the rights of Indian tribes to maintain their existence and integrity, which will promote the stability and security of their children and families. Recognize the value of the child in establishing, developing, and maintaining a political, cultural, social, and spiritual relationship with the child's tribe and tribal community. So really keep those tribal ties intact with the Indian child and their tribal community. If out-of-home placement is necessary, it's to prioritize placement of the child in accordance with the placement preference of ICWA, which is with relatives. If they can't be with the parents, then they need to be with relatives, family. If they can't be with family, then they need to be with somebody in the community, a suitable other, possibly. If they can't be with that and they have to be in a foster family, it's preferable that they are in an Indian foster family, foster home, and then at the very least, a non-native foster home. It could even be a foster home of a different tribe as well. That's preferred. And let's see, am I missing anything, Laura Lee?
I think, no, you did really great, because, you know, here we are, and we both have lived this law for a really long time. And just a reminder that, you know, you can go back to ICWA on YouTube and refresh what David has talked about with this provision in the gold standard. So yeah, I think that's it. So we'll go ahead and move on. And I want to talk about boarding schools. Indian schools were both on and off the reservations, but most commonly limited to the tribal member or family contact. What would happen, and I truly believe this, is that when boarding school era came around, that's when the Indian way of life was splintered. There was a where children were taken at a very young age, and they were set in a quasi setting with no love or affection. They were forbidden to speak their language, have their ceremonies, have their relatives around them, and they could not speak their language. Their hair was cut, and it was assimilation of the Indian way of living. There was a Captain Richard Henry Pratt back in 1879 who said that, who was pretty much the person who brought the boarding schools around, and he believed and subscribed to the principle of kill the Indian and save the man. It was a time where they went in and just stole our children from families. And if they didn't steal them, they would have the family say, if we do not take this child, we will not give you food, we will not give you shelter. And so what is a parent to do? Give up one child and keep the family safe? It was a very sad time, very sad time for Indian families. And I think that the fabric of American Indian people is family, Lainie, do you have anything?
Just kind of going off of that, yes, we are very community oriented, and once boarding schools were introduced, it was something just as simple as them developing like fences and yards and stuff for the people. That was lining out saying, this is mine and that's yours. This is our, like, they introduced that to the Native people when that was not our way. Our way is community, it's family, it's relational. So it changed a lot. A lot of generational trauma came from it, intergenerational trauma. My grandma still will not really share stories about it just because it's too hard. I think the love loss there went through so many generations. Yeah, that's
Yeah.
what was it called? The psychic numbing, turning off the feelings. Yeah, along those lines. That's what I think that's what a lot of our families face today still.
And don't you, I think too, Lainie, and I thank you, and I can hear your heart, the family heart there about your grandma, that it is we are victimized by colonialism, and it still is with us today, that intergenerational trauma.
Yes.
And I truly believe that when all the boarding schools happened, when we tore apart the fabric of American Indian people, they lost that family tie. That's why I believe there is so much alcoholism and suicide, domestic violence, all those things that we see in the world today with our children. That is not our natural way. It is not the natural way. But I believe many tribes today are seeing the healing that needs to happen. And we continue to bring forth that. And it's just not going to take, they talk about 7 generations, and how it takes time.
Mm-hmm.
Takes time. And so thank you, Lainie, for sharing your story. As well as not only, the boarding schools, there was a time when they were adopting children out, and there's a lot of children out there that is called, they're like a split feather. They were living in white culture, but they were missing a part of themselves. And so when they come home, they're like this split feather, because part of them is truly that Native person, but they haven't been raised within their culture. So trying to come back home, I know I came back home, and I remember when I danced for the first time, my life became full. It was an amazing transformation of where I was and to who I am today. And that happens a lot. And we need to be very mindful when we're working with Indian families, because I continue hearing, well, they never had their culture. They never lived within their culture. We need to be mindful. There's reasons. Mm-hmm. There's deep-seated reasons.
And that's part of them. That's part of their heart. So even if they've never been in their culture, half of their heart is still yearning for that culture. And just like you said, they will feel whole once they're able to engage. I'm the same exact way. Once I hear songs, then it's like my heart is whole again. And
yeah. Thank you, Lainie. Yeah, it is deep. So thank you. So continue learning about boarding schools, please. So intergenerational trauma is forced assimilation of Indians. It is, and I think we've talked about some of it already, but it's the colonization that happened. Dr. Maria Yellow Horse Brave Hart defines historical trauma as cumulative emotional and psychological wounding over a lifespan of generations, emerging from mass group trauma. And that's where we go back to the boarding schools and the continued relocation of others and stuff. And as Lainie said, the psychic numbing of people. And I want to say, we're talking about ICWA, the Indian Child Welfare Act, but I do have to also mention that this goes beyond just the Indian people. It can go on to different cultures, different identities, ethnic people. But today we're just learning about the Indian children that you're working with. So I believe that, some of the skills that were embodied through trauma was there's anger, there's avoidance, there's fear, there's guilt. I've known some American Indian people who don't want to go back to family because they feel guilty that they shamed them. And that just breaks my heart. So there's a lot of skills that are missing through this. Do you have anything else, Lainie, that you want to add here?
No, just to keep that in mind when you're working with the Native families, and you're gonna, I think, run into that a lot when you hear the parents talk a lot. It often stems from the guilt and the shame. So just keep that in mind when you're having your FTDMs with them and meetings with them, that's kind of where it's coming from, is the trauma.
Yes. Thanks, Lainie. And so remember, the abuses which led to the passage of ICWA were experienced by real people. Many of these victims today live in our Indian communities and or urban communities. They remember sometimes personally and sometimes in the community as a collective memory. Their children being unjustly taken. I remember long ago, I heard a story about a tribe on the East Coast where their natural state was to go out and harvest and would leave older children at home to care for the littlest ones. Somebody heard about this and the state came in and took over 200 children, stating that their parents were neglecting them when they had been doing this for ad infinitum, years. So those are the kinds of things that continue to haunt, I guess you can say, Indian people. So even today, ICWA is being challenged. If you have questions, there's been many recent findings by the courts that ICWA is constitutional, but many people like to fight it. I think it's important to stay in close contact with your supervisors about any recent notifications that have come, rulings. The NICWA site is quite beautiful because they do a lot of work out there within helping tribes fight the masses who believe that ICWA is not constitutional. It is a federal law. So anything else, Lainie?
No, that was perfect. Okay. Yeah.
I can get off on a roll. Let me tell you, I'm that passionate. I'm passionate, folks. So please bear with us. So
Laura and Lainie, there was a question in chat asking, why would folks fight ICWA?
I can think of baby Veronica, which was the father and this child were members of the Cherokee Nation in Oklahoma. The father was in the service. He was given notice, but not actively given notice. And the family that had this child didn't believe that the child needed to go home to this father. So they fought it and it took it up to the Supreme Court. And they ruled that the child needed to stay there. I don't know if that answers the question. I guess, why do people do anything, I guess, because they believe they have the right to our children.
Thank you.
Lainie, would you like to go over the active efforts? Because I know you have a story on this too.
Yes. So active efforts versus reasonable efforts. So reasonable efforts would be making referrals to services for the parents, and active efforts would be arranging the services, as I stated before, providing transportation for the parents to get there, helping the family, including the extended family, engage. I have a case where the grandma, the dependency isn't on the grandma, but she's the one caretaking, taking care of the child. And so we're engaging her in services, family therapy, individual counseling, whatever service she needs to make sure she can maintain placement of her grandson. So it's not only helping the parents, but actively helping the extended family members as well. Managing the case would be proactively engaging in diligent casework, follow-up visits, service provision. So continuing to go knock on doors, find out where the parents are, not just, oh, well, we sent a letter to the last known address, we called the last known phone number. No, actively engaging the extended family, saying, do you have an updated phone number? Do you have an updated address? The social workers go out and knock on doors, the last places that the parents were seen, things like that. And reasonable efforts would be meeting minimum policy standards, and active would be creatively meeting the needs of the family, such as more face-to-face contact than required by policy. That one's kind of the same thing, meeting the parents where they are instead of just doing the bare minimum contact with them. Reasonable efforts would be mainstream service provisions, and active efforts would be culturally appropriate service provisions, such as there are plenty of treatment facilities that are tailored to Native Americans and Indigenous people. There's doctors that are more tailored to Indigenous people. So it's getting them involved in what's culturally appropriate and what's going to get the parents to engage more. Kind of like I think when me and Laura Lee were talking about sweat houses and things like that would be more active efforts, getting the parents engaged in culturally appropriate services that are going to actually help them and stick with them instead of the mainstream services. Reasonable efforts would be updating the tribe and tribal social worker, because you got to keep the tribe involved all the time. So active would be seeking service and case management suggestions on an actively co-case managing where the tribe has available personnel. So keeping the tribe involved in every movement of the case. I know on a lot of my cases, that's what we do. We CC the tribe on everything. We do not make a move with the child without approval from the tribe or seeking the tribe out if we can't get a hold of the tribe due to such right now COVID and that things happening. Then we halt everything and wait until we can get approval from the tribe, because those ties are very, very important. So active efforts are just, it's a going above and beyond, but it really, really helps keep the Native family intact. I recently had a case where there was a new social worker, and it appeared that reasonable efforts were what he was doing. And so we had to go to court, and they brought that up, and he was removed. And so we have a new social worker, and she's doing amazing, providing active efforts to him. Before, it was reasonable efforts such as the social worker said, I sent you a letter of your case plan. I sent you a letter of the last court update. Well, the father was homeless. He didn't get the last letter. His mom got it, and she was the one that was actively providing efforts to get him involved. And so thankfully now we're on track with providing active efforts, but we had to raise that up in court and make sure that the department was providing active efforts to this family, to this father.
Yes, and I think that's where the advocates have a great role in too, is to understand what active efforts is, to make sure that the department is providing that.
Exactly, yes.
Yeah. Okay, so we'll go on. So just yesterday, we talked about NAIR, the Native American Inquiry Request by Heidi Walker, and LICWAC, the Local Indian Child Welfare Advisory Committee by Roxanne, and they did a fabulous job. So I'm not quite sure how much we want to go into this, except that it's really important to stay in contact with your social workers to see when they put the notices in. I'm one that will ask for the notices. I'm one that will make sure that the social worker is sending those notices out. And remember, only the tribe can determine if a child is a tribal member or not. And if all fails, talk to your supervisor, see if this is a case that needs to be lick-whacked. There are many times when I am filling in for people in court or waiting for my turn in court because things are by phone, and I'll hear something and I have to say, oh, wait a minute, this sounds like an Indian child. And I will get a hold of the guardian ad litem and or advocate supervisor, and we'll have a conversation. I think it's important to be mindful that these two programs here are here to help us protect the Indian family. So you can always go back online and watch the great video from yesterday. It was pretty awesome. So as an advocate, you are always involved in this process as well. So remember that, please. Understanding relational worldview. This can be a very complicated topic, and I'm gonna, Lainie and I are gonna kind of tag team this, but what I wanna say about the relational worldview is that Indian people look at things holistically as a whole, mind, body, spirit, and many of our other cultures think linear of cause and effect. Cause, and then you have an effect. Indian people look at it differently. You know, we're intuitively, we're not always oriented and we're fluid in many ways. You know, we balance harmony and relationships. Every event is in relation to another. So, Lainie, do you have anything?
Just like you said, it's a lot of everything's in relationship to another. It's not necessarily what's the problem and let's fix it and what's wrong. It's what are our strengths and what's our a little bit of weaknesses and how we can get back in balance, what's missing on certain parts of our quadrant that can help support the other part, things like that. So we're very, like you said, holistic.
Yes. And you just mentioned the quadrant, so I'm going to go to that. And I just think that, you know, Indian people really look at having natural healers and helpers in families. So Lainie, you talked about the quadrants. Would you like to go over that, please?
Yes. So this is the relational worldview, and it's inclusive of everything. So one quadrant can't exist or change without affecting all of the others. And historical trauma is a part of this context. Religion is mind and spirit are about belonging, home, learned positive and negative, innate positive and negative. So this, again, is just, these are four quadrants that are sometimes used, and when one is out of balance, then it affects the rest of them. So we often look at how we can get everything in balance to get working again.
Great. You know, Terry Cross, who I believe David Simmons mentioned, who was the original founder of ICWA, he wrote a beautiful article on relational worldview, and I would encourage you to look for that article or just go online and do some research. The article is really too large for me to actually send it to you, but I would just look it up and find out more about this. I have to tell you just a quick little story because I love her so much. And Lori Irwin and I go back some many years, and we do not only state trainings, but we've done national trainings on ICWA. And I remember one time, and I only tease her because I love her. And so I introduced her as my linear friend. And, you know, and she's open because she understands that's her way of being. But she is also understanding of the relational world view as well. So you'll find I tease people because if I love you, I'm going to tease you. That's just the way I am. So, so
real quick, I also think that's just native humor as well. So if you get teased, it's a good thing.
Thanks, lady. That's true. Yes. Okay. So I'm going to go ahead and move on to the next slide. Building effective relationships. Woo! This is one of those really important aspects. So Miss Lainie, I'm going to pass it over to you.
Okay. It's crucial to build the relationship first. You, such as going into the home and introduce yourself, not just your role, but where you're from, your reason, your why you're there, and understand that it takes time. There's a lot of distrust of Native families and outsiders. So just understand that you're going to kind of have to keep showing up in the same way and just be very respectful. Exercise your power and control and authority cautiously. Saying things such as, we may have one of your children, or I need your help to advocate for your child. That way it's not coming across as you're kind of throwing your power and control around of, tell me, or I'm telling you what's best for your children. Kind of ask and include the families, include the people, the Native people in the conversation. Don't make agreements that you can't keep, because obviously there is a history of broken promises. So please keep your word. Like I said, there's a lot of distrust and history of that we're trying to overcome. So keeping your word and being honest goes a long ways. Be authentic and do what's comfortable for you, but don't be afraid to step outside of your comfort zone if you're invited to. If you're invited to do something, definitely participate. It would look at disrespectful if you were to decline. You may not always be accepted right off the bat. Like I said, it takes time. It takes time showing up all the time, keeping your word, and it takes time. And please keep that in mind.
Great.
Do you have
So
anything else?
You know, I think this is where I'm going to tell you a little story about. I had a gentleman up in Bentle, Alaska, and this was some years back, that I had two of the tribe's children under my care here in the state of Washington. And I would mark off anywhere from 1 hour to 2 hours on a monthly basis to just have a conversation with him, because going in there and wanting to talk business is good, but I and him, we had the most beautiful relationship. We would talk about family, about ceremonies, about gathering, I learned so much of the tribe's history, and then we would talk to children. But then we would talk more, and we would eat together. He would be up there and I would be here, but we would be eating together. And it was a most beautiful relationship. So you cannot, please know that rushing when you're talking with Indian people may not always be the best. It's building that relationship. I love that, man. We had so much fun. So here's respect. Is highly valued in Indian country. Leave formal clothes at home. Make sure that, if you have notes and charts, ask before you start taking notes. It's good just to have a conversation with people. Uniforms sometimes are a sign of bureaucracy and being authoritarianism, you might say, and so shed the bureaucracy image, be genuine, authentic, as Lainie had said, and when in doubt, ask the questions. It's okay to ask if you don't know. Relationships is with you and not the organization. It's between you and the person you're speaking with, because you may build a relationship with one person in the tribe, but not have one with another person. And I want to know if Buffy Villa is on this call today. Ryan, do you know?
I'm here, Laura.
Buffy, this is where Buffy is someone who is very dear to me. I've known her for some time. I remember when she was pregnant with one of her children who are teenagers now. And Buffy took my position when I left the county years back and has come into her own as an Indian woman. And I'm just very proud of her. And we used to do this training. She has a beautiful story that I'm asking her to share with you all. And I think she knows what it is. And it's, don't refuse gifts or invitations within reason, because we know that your programs have those. But Buffy, I'm going to give it to you, my dear friend and sister, because I love the story.
I was like thinking, which one? I got you. I know, I got you. I have lots of fun stories. So, I think trying to find your way, and I know you guys talk about it later, I think in this presentation. If you don't, I'll bring it up later. I don't want to kill the excitement, but as I was learning my way and kind of navigating, building a relationship with, different Indian communities, I had the opportunity to go to Yakima and visit a young man who was living with his grandma and grandpa, just to check in, see how he was doing and see how the family was doing. So I'm, go and visit, and grandpa had just got back from a hunting trip and had some elk. I'm not a person who prefers to eat elk or, other buffalo or other things like that. And so anyways, grandpa offered me some, and I was like, sure, I'd love to have some. Then grandma and grandpa engaged in a little debate about he was giving it to me cold, and grandma's like, you can't do that, it has to be warmed up. And that was really funny. And anyways, the bottom line is I ate cold elk, and I, graciously ate it, chewed it, and asked for some water. So anyways, the point is that it wasn't in my comfort zone, but it was very important for me to be respectful. They were very excited, and it was a way for us to build relationship and be able to show that I honor them. I remember going also to a training somewhere down the way throughout my journey, and somebody, I wish I could remember her name, but she said one time that if you're in Indian country and you refuse food or water, that the impression or the message that you're sending is that you actually think they would poison you. And so to refuse it, that's kind of what that would mean. And so anyway, so I was glad I ate the elk. It was a fun bonding experience, and yeah, I've not had any since.
Thank you, Buffy. I just love that story, and I can tell that it just is very close to your heart because of that bonding and that experience. So
yeah, it's funny when you go into homes and certain people impact you, and I like visually can remember their yard and their home and those experiences. So I was very grateful.
Yes.
Thanks, Laura.
Thank you. I just love that story. It just tells so much about going into Indian homes, you know, when you're invited and you're offered things, and how important it is not to say no. You need to try and say yes to that. So, do you have anything else, my Lainie?
No,
Okay.
that was
Okay. We're gonna move on to actions that erode trust. Personal biases. I think we all come to the table with fears and biases, assumptions, or prejudices about Indian people. I think, you know, it's just a human nature, you might say. It's something that that will be picked up on if you go into communities and have assumptions. Even to this day, I am asked about how much Indian I am, or, you know, you don't look like an Indian, or, you know, there's so many alcoholics and there's so many cars in the front yards and stuff. And, you know, and everything is a reason. So if you have those, I'm going to encourage you to look at them, to own them, and to know that there's assumptions and prejudices in all of us. It truly is something that would erode any trust that you may have. It doesn't mean that you're wrong or you're bad or anything. It just is part of us.
Mhm.
I think even within the Indian communities, there's their own little prejudices.
Mhm.
You know, I mean, larger reservations, you know, from the north or the south, you know. So I think you could probably talk about that, Lainie, on your res.
Yeah, no, they're there, yes.
Yeah. But, you know, we all treat each other with respect, with kindness, with an open heart, and everything's going to be good. You know, I just believe that. And I think it's a continual learning experience to grow within oneself. I am a lifetime student in this journey of mine. And so we're going to move on to other actions that erode trust, and that's failure to consult. If you as advocates or GILs are not reaching out to tribes, that is something that you need to be mindful about. You need to find tribal people. The department may have names and numbers, or you can go online to sites and find contact numbers. I believe, was it David that gave us, or Lori may have given us the BIA or different LICWAC. Roxanne yesterday gave us regional LICWAC people that you can touch base with. There's a lot of people within the department that is able to guide you. And if you don't know, and if you're finding resistance, you know, social workers are busy. They really, truly are busy, like all of us this past year, and with many challenges. So I have to give grace, but I also know that I need to be mindful about the continued advocacy that you put forth and Guardian Ad Litem's put forth for Indian children. So you need to make sure that the tribes are always consulted. So taking actions prior to building relationships and trust. That is, I think we've talked about that. Anything else, my friend Lainie?
Nope, that was everything.
Okay, so we're gonna move on. I think this is one of our easier ones, defining our roles as an advocate in Indian cases, and I'm going to let Lainie take some of this because I'm getting hoarse because I'm still recovering from a cold.
Okay. So, gathering information, facilitating, advocate, and monitor is the role of the advocate. We can go on to the next slide for gathering information, the first part. So we obtain firsthand a clear understanding of the needs and situations of the child. We carry out an objective examination of the situation, which includes the relevant history, the environment, the relationships, and the needs of the child. Gathering information means we recognize the tribe's inherent tribal jurisdiction over the child and the custody proceedings. The preferred placement with extended family if a child must be removed from the parents. Remember to always include the family. And have regular, hopefully monthly, in-person contact with the child to have an in-depth knowledge of the case in order to make fact-based recommendations to the court. So you're reporting on what you're seeing firsthand, as opposed to getting information from social worker or things like that. So important questions to ask could be tribal affiliation, the family tree, and contact the tribe yourself. So contact information for the tribal representative. The NAIR process, ask questions about that, if it was completed, things like that, and ask if the case needs to be LICWAC'd, and just continue to always ask questions, because things could change throughout the case. Sometimes they do relative searches at the beginning, but then don't do it again, and things can change. Relatives can change their mind. They might not be ready at the beginning of the case to take a child, but then circumstances change and later on in the case they're ready to. So we're always actively working to get children with their families. Anything else there, Lauralee?
Nope, I think you covered it, my friend.
Okay. And the next one is facilitate. So seek cooperative solutions by acting as a facilitator among conflicting parties. I run into this a lot because, again, there's a lot of distrust from the families to the department. As hard as the social workers may work trying to build that relationship and trust, sometimes it's just helpful for a GAL or advocate to help facilitate and bridge those gaps, because we're an objective kind of third party. We're not one or the other. So sometimes that's helpful. And so find a gentle but firm way of making sure that ICWA is a guiding force in any dependency action involving the Indian child. Such as a member of a federally recognized Indian tribe or eligible for membership of an Indian tribe. Member, the tribe determines that whoever is a member, such as the biological child of the member of an Indian tribe. Tribal membership and tribal enrollment is different for each tribe. And for the purposes of ICWA, a child can only be a member of one tribe. Although courts have allowed other tribes to intervene with the passage of the Washington State ICWA, this provision is still unclear, but just remember that a child can be a member of only one tribe. Let's see.
Once again, it all comes down to relationships.
Yes. Yep.
Okay. I'll advance this.
Okay. And as an advocate, you are identifying and advocating for the best interests of the Indian child. At every hearing, provide reports that include the recommendations and always have in mind the tribal wishes, because hopefully you're including the tribe in all of the decisions. Report to the court any views or wishes expressed by the child and or the tribe. So you can always report on obviously what you think is in the best interest of the child, but it's also good to report what the stated wishes are of the child and the tribe as well. That way the court's informed of everything. And you can advocate for and provide recommendations for specific appropriate services.
Can I just stop there? I think that's the place where I think Buffy also has another story with an Indian mom. Buffy, is that correct about her services?
Laura, hey, I'm not sure entirely. I think one of the things that the Indian story that I normally tell about my mom, I guess it does somewhat relate to making sure services are appropriate. In that story, sorry, I'm going to move my screen so I'm actually looking at you all. Otherwise, I feel weird.
I know.
In that story, I had a mom who was identified as possibly Native, but when I would ask her questions in regards to, whether services needed to be provided for her kids or what things we could make sure were happening appropriately for her children, she would always say like, no, like, I'm not really connected, whatever. I went to her great grandmother's home and was able to notice very quickly that her great grandmother was very much connected by the, art on the wall. And she ended up sharing stories about one of her uncles being a fisherman, things like that. And so I was able to go back to the mother and say, hey, like, I'm a little confused because it really seems like your family's very connected, but you have always kind of said you're not. And her response to me was that because she had been living a life of not being sober, that those were the reasons why she had disconnected from those things, and that it wasn't so much that she didn't want to be connected or didn't want her children to, but she had the shame that Lainie and Laura talked about earlier that was impacting her ability to engage. And so anyway, so we were able to get her engaged through those processes. So I guess asking deeper questions. I think the second story that you might have been talking about was a mother who was struggling with some anxiety, getting out of bed in the morning. That was kind of the main issue, is that she had I think he was around 5 or 6. So he was getting on the bus in the morning and she was struggling with getting herself up, getting him up, those kind of things, because of her anxiety was debilitating to her. And we kept trying everything and just couldn't really get her in a good place. And then she was able to go to the tribe and actually met with a medicine man and was able to use some techniques that were really showing to help her. And I think at that time, the department was kind of really wanting her to go to traditional mental health, really wanting her to have a med evaluation so that she could get on psychotropic meds, those types of things. And I had to really push towards focusing on, has her behavior changed? Not so much what service she participated in, not whether you could get the documentation that you needed, but rather if her behavior is changing because of the culturally relevant service that she is participating in, then that's what we wanted to see. And so that was the piece that ended up really working for her. The traditional things were not something that was going to work for her. So hopefully
and
that
those
helps,
were
Laura.
it, Buffy, because I think hearing stories from guardian ad litems and advocate supervisors and working with their advocates and knowing these stories are so important, because thinking outside the box, or I like to say I don't have a box to think out of, but I hopefully you'll have those avenues to find the treatments that may work for a family. So go ahead, Buffy.
It really just took listening to her. I think that's what, it was so easy for people to, in both stories actually, for people to just accept or dismiss what was being said, because it was a lack, not understanding, right? So the not understanding, when you hear medicine man, what does dominant culture think of that, or how do they respect that? And so it was really about listening to her. And when she actually started to talk about the things that she was learning and the skills that she was learning, it was very clear to me that that was helpful and was actually making an impact. And so being able to then be that voice to help her be able to express that to, you know, the other entities that were having struggles around understanding it became very important.
And Buffy makes a good point there too, is that, you know, we are advocates for children, but I think parents also need to have somebody who will help them work on what they need, and especially within the Indian communities and stuff, is that we need to be listening, as Buffy said, and sometimes just listening opposed to speaking, you're going to find out beautiful things about parents.
Yeah, and it was in that little boy's best interest to be with his mother, and to be with his mother who was healthy. And so it was important to help bridge that gap, because that was something that in my role as advocate in that moment, I was able to do. Thanks,
Yes.
Laura.
No, thank you. Lainie, anything else, my friend?
Nope, that was perfect. That was a beautiful share, Buffy. Thank you.
Yes. And then so we'll move on to this one.
Laura, before you move on, there's a couple of questions in chat, if you don't mind.
No, not at all.
So I think this might be the bigger one. What do you do if you honestly disagree with the wishes of the tribe?
Well, without sounding not okay, I'll say I think that you really need to be able to see the tribe's position. The tribe is really looking out for the best interests of their children and their citizenship in their tribe. I think that you may need to go and talk to your supervisor about this and continue to do your research around tribal people and understanding why they're making certain recommendations. Lainie?
Just, yeah, going off of that, like just really try and understand where the tribe is coming from. There's a place for their recommendations and why they're making those recommendations.
Yes.
And a lot of it is just to honor ICWA.
Thank you. All right. Anything else, Ryan? I hope I answered the question. You can always give us a call. It can be a very delicate answer as well, but I appreciate the question.
Thanks, Laura. And I guess I would just add on to that too, if you don't mind, not only questioning, you know, how the tribe got there, but how you yourself got there as well.
And I think that goes back to one of our previous slides about our own views, our own biases, our own judgments that we come and prejudices we come to the table with. And like I said, they're not bad. They're just part of who you are, who I am, and how do I continue to look at myself to see where that's coming from.
Thank you.
No, thank you. Okay, Miss Lainie. We'll go on to monitor.
All right. Well, monitor means following the case, reviewing the records and other information, and sometimes making the necessary recommendations. Monitoring and participating in some of or all of the court hearings, the case reviews, and making recommendations and assisting in the coordination of services and recourses to the family. This may change depending on tribal resources and agreement with the case plan goals and changes in placement or rulings by the court.
Yeah. Okay. And you probably recognize these from some of your trainings.
Anything else to add on that?
Yeah. Because change, there could be change throughout the case, and just make sure, and I don't think Lainie or I or anybody who does this work cannot stress the active efforts about how important that is to understand, and how important it is to make sure that the tribe is always involved. And I think I might have mentioned this, that I was on a hearing and I was listening to a case, which was an Indian case, an ICWA case, because mom was an enrolled member. The tribe had decided that, or made a ruling that the child may not be enrollable at this time, because as if you remember from some of our training, is that a tribe is sovereign. They make their own laws, their own regulations within their citizenship of their tribe, and can change at any time. I think I was disheartened because nobody was making sure that the child was getting culturally appropriate things going on in their life. Though mother may be enrolled, the child still needs to be treated as an Indian child. And how do we do that? And that is something that is pretty mainstream, and how you can go online and continue researching, continue talking with people at the tribe. How can you help? Even talking with the enrolled member, a parent, how would they like things happening with their child? So always play, there's case plans and goals and lots of resources that you can tap into. So what should an advocate do? It's an advocate's job to understand and ensure that the Indian child's special rights are acknowledged and secured by ensuring that the state agency, the department, is following ICWA. In order to advocate in such a manner, it is essential that the advocate understands and accepts that the historical tendency of institutional abuse directed at Indian families led Congress to enact the ICWA Act back in 1978. And then we had some new regulations back in 2016 that came about. An advocate, you're not expected to be an expert, but you can be very knowledgeable of some of the provisions that are under that law. So you need to develop an understanding that Indian children have advocates who zealously, I love that word, zealously protect their rights as Indian children, and just as any children that you would speak for. So, Lainie, is there anything that you would like to add to this?
No, I kind of like how you added that there, just as any children that you speak for. Myself and another guardian ad litem in my department who's not on the Native team, she loves active efforts. She loves everything that the ICWA team does, that she does her work in her field as if they were Indian children, because me and her talk, and we just say every child believes or should have
Yes,
advocacy anyway. So I love that.
I do too. Thanks. So we'll move on. So this was a saying by a great man, very wise man, Tom Tremaine, who I had the honor of knowing, and he worked for the Northwest Justice Project and was a tribal court with the Kalispell tribe that I had worked for many years. And he once said, know what you don't know. And I like to add, know what you don't know until you know it. And then you continue to seek the knowledge, continue to learn what you need to learn, because I don't know everything. I will continue to learn. In fact, I learned some really great gems this week one more time to help me in this journey in helping Indian families, as well as all the advocates that I supervise in helping them help their families. So I just love that saying. I just love it to pieces. So here we're going to go into tribal culture and differences. And I'm going to have Lainie take this piece on because I think it's important to know that each tribe has their own way of being, their own cult, their own ceremonies, their own way. And I remember, I think Casey said it the 2 days ago in her training. She was raised in Alaska, and Alaskan natives do not have powwows. And so they're not across the board. And I just have to give and I think Buffy can appreciate this one moment that I'm gonna do a learning opportunity with everyone on the call today. And Lainie, please, I need to show an example of some things that you may not realize that you're saying that is actually can be very disrespectful to Indian people. I was in a leadership meeting with Buffy one time because we're going to be doing some learning opportunities within the organization that I work for. And one of the leadership team said, well, I'll just go have a powwow with my team. I was told that my knee was just a shaken, and I had to stop and had to have a learning opportunity at that very moment, because to me, a powwow is not a meeting. A powwow to me is sacred, it's honoring, and it's dancing for my ancestors, my veterans, the community as a whole, because the drum is the heartbeat. So it's much different than just a meeting. I thought I was going to get fired, but it was just one of those things. I think we need to be mindful about that. And people talk about Indian time. And my grandma, and I know I'm going to take my little horse and we're going to go down this road for a minute. My grandma used to tell me that used to upset her when people would say, oh, you're just on Indian time. And she told me a story that I will always remember in my heart because it was so precious. She said that Indian people they're gatherers, they're hunters, they're travelers to different different tribes. And there's a time in history when one tribe would travel to another tribe to do a ceremony or a wedding or a gathering of some sort. And traveling tribe came across a herd of elk. And so they needed meat for the winter. So they gathered what they needed and took just enough for them to survive during the winter. They took it back to their home. Then they went back and traveled to the ceremony. And so I think we need to think about when we use terms like that, because Indian time can mean different things to different people. It's not that we're always late. There's reasons for this. And so I just wanted to share that with you. And I will come back to the road here and let Lainie take over now. Thanks, Lainie.
Well, another one to go off of the powwow in Indian time. What about the lowest man on the totem pole? That one. You hear that often as well, which does, I mean, it's insinuating that you're the lowest rung, I guess, on the ladder. But if you're the lowest one on the totem pole, that's strong. You're holding, you know, you're big and strong. So
Thank you.
that's another one to be
Yes.
mindful of. So yes, tribal and cultural differences. The ideas and concepts presented in this training are intended to be generic and not necessarily specific to any one tribe or Indian individual, because as you see on the map, there are so many different reservations and tribes, and each one has its own different customs, cultural traditions, ceremonies, just way of life. And often what I will run into is, I mean, although it's great, the children that are placed in non-native family homes in the Spokane area say they are Choctaw Nation, and because of the surrounding tribes, it's great to use the surrounding tribes, but to say, oh, it's fine, we're going to the Spokane powwow, and that's how we're going to honor the cultural tribes. Well, the Spokane tribe is a lot different from the Choctaw Nation. They're a lot different, and it's just really helpful to a lot of tribes, thankfully, are utilizing the internet and those resources, so they put a lot on their tribal websites. I know my tribe, the Spokane tribe, has done an overhaul of our SpokaneTribe.com website. There's the history on there, there's links to our Salish and what our tribe is doing, and cultural and ceremonies that we're coming up with. So just always advocate to kind of research what specific tribe the child or the parents are a part of, and not just have a blanket of, well, the Spokane tribe and Kalispell tribe and Colville tribe are around here, so that's what we're going to engage in. It needs to be specific to the child and honor that. A lot of tribes have books listed on their website as well that you can utilize that are specific to them, and a lot of them are revitalizing their language. I think it is the Kalispell tribe, they have an app that their children can use, that their members can use, that have their own Salish app that they can text in the language. They can listen to it and learn from it. So
Yes.
there's a lot out there, and just always keep in mind specific things, even in the surrounding ones. Although we all have some sort of Salish kind of dialect, Spokane is different from Kalispell, and Spokane is different from Colville, and Colville is different from Kalispell. And then you have Coeur d'Alene that's right across the border there too.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And we're all, although close, there are differences, and
Yes.
just keep that in mind.
And I know that
And sometimes you're also going to run into some that aren't even federally recognized. Sorry, go ahead, Laura.
No, that's true. I didn't mean to. Yeah. I was just going to say that the coastal tribes here in the state have giveaways opposed to powwows. They do other different ceremonies.
Yes. Yeah. And here in Spokane, we do those at powwows. We honor, and we have somebody that's going to be honored, and everybody does it at the powwow.
Yeah. So here we have, for some reason, oh, you know what I forgot to do is let you know that the state of Washington has 5 tribal advocate programs. The Spokane tribe, they're having to revise it and bring it back online, but they have a judge who is very interested in bringing that back into full effect. The Yakima Nation has a advocate program. The Kalispell tribe, in whom I was honored to help implement that program and work for them for little over 7 years. The Quileute tribe on the coast, as well as the Port Gamble Squalum, have programs. And as you can see, there's just so many different tribes around the state that that could use and continue to make sure that their citizenship is maintained, and that's through your voices when we find out that we may have some of their children, and that goes across the board. So here's our talking circle. So if there's questions, we can do some question and answers. And Buffy, if you have anything, or Lori or Casey, if you're on the line, please go ahead, and if you have answers, I'm going to ask you to jump in as well. Because I cannot see the questions.
I am taking a look, Lauralee. I don't see questions on this. Is it in chat?
Yes.
I missed part of that.
Yes, yes.
I don't see any additional questions coming up unless we have not discussed about bringing in LICWAC. There was a question about examples of issues you would need to bring in LICWAC when monitoring a case with tribal children.
Okay. Being a LICWAC member, I would ask the social worker, because there's liaisons around the state that can help you with how we would bring a case to in front of the committee. So there's different reasons. I think for me, I'm always asking if this case can be LICWAC'd, and because tribes may not always get back to social workers in a readily manner due to the size, especially this past year. There's a lot of stuff going on within, especially a smaller tribe. They may not have resources. And so I would always ask the question. You can always be told no, but always ask it. Anything else there, Miss Casey?
Yeah, so while you were answering, some more questions popped up. So we have a question: is it ever appropriate for a child to be separated from family and relatives so that they can, I think, attend tribal cultural experiences? Might be a word missing from that question, so I'm inferring.
Lainie, I'm not sure I really truly get the gist of the question.
That's what I don't know either.
I'm wondering if maybe the person who asked the question could maybe clarify. Do you mean like being put in a separate placement, or being maybe moved out of the area? Is that the type of separation you're asking about? We have another question about how can I bring in cultural activities to a tribal child with disabilities? I think that might depend on the type of challenges they might have on that one.
That's true. And I think knowing the name of the tribe and contacting their representative, or going online to the tribal site and finding out what's going on, as well as, trying to contact an elder within the tribe to talk with them.
Mm-hmm.
And if you
Laura,
don't,
I have a child who is completely wheelchair bound, nonverbal, doesn't have, doesn't move, those kind of things. Her foster mom attends. They have a monthly native. It's going virtual now too. It's based out of Seattle, but they have a monthly native foster parent support group, and they share things. And so the foster parent attends those so that she can get ideas, and then she just tweaks whatever they usually do an activity with the kids, and she just kind of tweaks it however she can. So for example, she plays music and tries to have tribal music around, because our little Noelle does respond to sounds and noises and smiles, and can show joy, and so she does those kind of things. She also just ensures that she's wrapped in tribal pattern blankets, and she just does what she would do for any child. So depending on the disability, I would just encourage people to know that you can always do that. I've also had people say things out of lack of understanding, like, well, it's an infant. So how am I going to teach a culture to an infant?
Yeah.
And what I say to that is that culture is something that we actually start developing in utero, meaning that things that our mother or family around us does while a woman's pregnant, all of those things kind of contribute to how we see the world and how we connect. So for infants, it's about being around people that look like them. It's about them seeing those images. It's about those things becoming comfortable. And one of the things about culture that's really important is that it's not always the things that we see, it's how we relate to the world. And that's why having the family connection or the people that live that way of being and that child having as much exposure to that as possible is really important. Otherwise, children will lose large gaps of kind of how you relate to the world, how you see the world, some of the cultural differences that Laura and Lainie were sharing with you guys. So much of that is unspoken. It's how we smile or not smile, or how we, I don't know, eat, how we, all of these things that we don't really think about. And mostly, and I don't say this to be offensive, oftentimes if you live in dominant culture, you don't think about these things because you live in a culture that reflects your culture, right? You live in dominant culture. And so it's hard to say, what does culture mean? Because it's for you every day, what's normal for you. And so for people who live in dominant culture who don't share that same culture, it very much, they can tell the differences, right? I remember Laura and Leah and I did this training once. It was actually a Spokane tribal member who came to our training, and we were talking about European American values and Native American values, and not one being right or wrong, but just differences and trying to understand them. And I remember seeing him in the back of the room, and I was thinking in my brain, like, oh, he doesn't need to be here. Like, we're really trying to speak to people who don't understand Native culture. He came up afterwards and he says, I'm so thankful I came to this. I never understood why other people, who aren't Native did the things they did. And now I understand because we were comparing the two, and it made Laura and I just bust out laughing. So
Yeah.
Anyways, and that's where the understanding comes from. I think for the person who said they don't agree with what the tribal person said, I think a lot of that really comes down to understanding that when you have differences in values, then you are going to see situations differently. And so really seeking to understand that is so important. And really talking to people that can help you work through it. Because like Laura said, or I should say Judge Tremaine said, know what you don't know. If you don't know it, you can't understand it. And so, that's where Laura is available. I know Lainie is, I know Casey and myself, any of us would be willing to have those challenging, create a safe space to have those challenging conversations for us to really be able to help you sort through where your feelings are coming from, and maybe share a different perspective, and where that might be, what that might be rooted in, can be really important.
Thanks, Buffy. And the foster care resource that you were talking about, Roxanne Finney, who spoke yesterday, is going to send me that site, and I will make sure that we get it to you all who's on the call today or this week, because she did say that it is open to the masses. So I will get that to you. And Lainie, you have a new little one, correct?
I do. Yes, I do.
Yes.
Yeah. She's my niece. Was placed with us in December.
Yeah. So she was kept in the family.
Yep. Yes, they did a great job. And thankfully, well, I'm in the field, so I knew our tribal contact to get involved, because they were going to place her in foster care because they couldn't get a hold of our tribe, which they just sent an email. It was one email, and our tribe had gotten shut down out here because of a mini outbreak of COVID. So I, as a GAL, contacted our tribal person, told her the situation. She reached out and said the wishes of the tribe was to keep her with family regardless, and so they were able to kind of fast track
Yes.
us for placement for her, so she didn't have to go to a foster placement. Yeah, we're doing great. She's
I
doing
know.
great.
I
And
was
also-
hoping,
Oh, sorry, Laura.
go ahead. I was just hoping to see her, but I know that she's sleeping and
Eating
so,
right
yeah.
now. She was
Oh.
crying, but I heard she must be eating now because she's fine.
Okay.
Well, I just wanted to say thank you for sharing that, Lainie, because that's an excellent example of why we need to follow up if kiddos aren't placed with tribal foster homes or with family, is that there may be a reason why the tribe couldn't be reached or wasn't able to respond, that we want to make sure that those family members aren't being lost in that shuffle.
Exactly.
We did get some clarification on the question from earlier. So the person who was asking about children being placed, so they're asking about being placed outside of the local area, so maybe outside of the county or even farther potentially. Would that be appropriate so that they could attend tribal or cultural events for their own tribe, is what I'm guessing.
If they are close to family, I think it's important that they stay close to family,
Mhm.
because we have to remember there was a lot of relocation. So a lot of tribes that are in the Southwest or Northwest or wherever, even in the Midwest, there's tribes that if the tribe does take jurisdiction, yes, the child would go. But you are able to find different ways of keeping that culture alive within that child by visiting websites, by talking with the tribe and seeing what you can do to help the foster parent. I think that may have.
I agree with that. Yes.
Okay, there's a couple of more questions and a request for an extra story, but I'll leave that one for a minute. So we have one question related to Buffy, to your story earlier about sharing with the elk, and that you shared it would be considered disrespectful to refuse food or drink at the home if it's offered. This person is wondering, what if you're not able to eat what's offered? Would it be acceptable to just accept something to drink, or is it ever okay to not accept something to eat or drink, or to accept it but not actually consume it?
It's a good question. Bethy,
Yeah,
you want to go?
Yeah, I did. I just think, that's about where, when we have cultural differences, we talk and we communicate and share. So I think in a situation like that, if you really can't take that, then you just say, thank you so much. Like, I wish that I could take your offering. That means a lot to me that you're sharing that with me. Unfortunately, I have an allergy to whatever, or whatever the reasoning is. So I think that's where explaining it is very, oftentimes that's, when we have cultural misunderstanding, if we share the reasons why, people are usually accepting of those things.
And going about it authentically and from your heart, that will be heard.
Yes. And kind of goes back to our relationship building. That would help build that relationship then, because you're not just succumbing to whatever they want, it's
Yeah.
you're trying to be respectful and thankful, but also
Yes.
And one thing that I've found that helps for me is that I have food allergies myself, and I will say, thank you so much for offering. I'm not able to eat that, but I ask how it's prepared or why it's important for them. And if it's, something that's important to their family, whether it's strictly important culturally or just to their family unit, just showing a genuine interest also can really be helpful. To say, I can't take that, but I'd love to know more about why that's important to you.
That's beautiful, Casey. Thank you for sharing that.
Sure.
Thank you. Thank you.
So people are asking more things and they're popping up and I'm trying to keep track. We have let's see, that yesterday was mentioned that few Native children are able to be placed in Native foster homes. Do tribes have resources to direct toward finding and nurturing Native foster families? And are state and federal agencies supporting this effort? And then one final piece is, how can all Washingtonians help, if that's happening or not?
That's a big question. And I think depending on the tribe, they may be licensed to take children, but the state may not recognize them as foster parents. Lainie, you want to help me with this one? Because that's a real big question within
Is it? Okay. Like you said, I think it's dependent on the tribe. I can speak for our tribe that I know with the Spokane tribe. Out here in our tribal court and tribal realm, we have a lot of Native foster families out here. And they're always looking for more. I mean, we get some state funding and federal funding to help recruit and do a lot more active efforts, I guess, in getting Native foster homes. But I know for Spokane tribe, we do have some out here. Since I got placement on my niece, they're trying to recruit me to just go through the classes and become a foster home, a licensed foster home. But I can't, I think it's just dependent on each tribe.
Yes.
I would add some technical things, and it is also dependent on tribes, but most tribes are eligible for the same Title IV-E funding that funds state systems. But the problem with that is oftentimes it then creates barriers, right? Or things that they have to follow. So some tribes may be willing to do that, others may not, but there is federal funding that does support tribes in their foster care programs in the same way that the federal government supports states in those processes, so that it does exist. There are some barriers to accessing it sometimes. And then I think it's also, I think sometimes, and Lainie, you can correct me if I'm wrong, sometimes, it's the trust of the system is really hard. The foster care system is a dominant culture system. It's not a way of being for Native people. And so, it can be challenging to want to enter into that space. And so those are some of the barriers that can, and some people are more willing than others to enter that space. And so I think those are the other points of view I would offer.
Thanks, Buffy. I think we'll just take a couple more because there's a video that I would like to get to. And so anything else there? Ms. Casey?
The only other thing I had was that request for the story. So I don't know how much time we have, but there was a request to know more about Buffy's story about when an advocate does not agree with a tribe's wishes.
Yeah, I can try to be short, Laura, so I don't impede on your time so much. But I do think it's helpful. I have two, but I'm going to only share one of them. And it was a case where a tribe was unwilling to support an adoption. So they were supportive of the placement, because they realized there was not an alternative. The placement actually was a non-Native placement, but they had done a really good job. They had actually traveled, the tribe was in California, very small tribe. They had traveled there when the tribe had some kind of natural disaster to attempt to help. They had just shown a real genuine desire to find connection to the child that they were going to raise. But finding permanency was really hard because the family needed the assistance that the adoption process provides. And so, but the tribe was unwilling to support an adoption. And so what ended up happening was so it'd be very easy to just say, oh, well, tribe, you're wrong. This is what the family needs. You support the placement. It's just a piece of paper, whatever the dominant culture kind of view of it, being dismissive of it. You could go that route, right? And then just push your, what you think is right, that this child should be adopted. But what it took was accepting that if the tribe wasn't in agreement with that, it was not going to happen. And so coming from that lens, we were then able to see, okay, so what's the actual barrier, and how do we work around it, or how do we find the supports? And the issue with why they weren't eligible, the children were not eligible for Title III, which is very complicated. I'm not going to explain it to you guys. But if they're not eligible, they're not eligible. And so they would not get, and they're not a relative, so they would not get funding through guardianship. So then it became, well, is the tribe willing to accept them as a relative, and write a letter so that we could do the RGAP funding? Is the state willing to go back and look at the Title IV-E eligible requirement? So we had meeting after meeting trying to resolve it. The bottom line is, the state, it's the one case in the history of my 22 years where a Title E funding issue was actually changed. It's very unheard of. I'm not exactly sure how it all happened, but it was a miracle, and we worked through it. So the moral of the story is that it was really about coming together, understanding what each party's the position was, and then being able to figure out how to find the solution and it was very frustrating throughout the process for lots of the different parties. But it really took that kind of level of effort to come together to figure out how to find the solution, because we had lots of areas of agreement. There were we had a base to work from. So that would be my advice, is that, legally, if a tribe is not going to support something, it's going to be very challenging to make that advocacy be fruitful. And so in that vein, it's best to figure out, I can't change that ultimate fact, but I can possibly try to figure out how to make it better, or how to make us come together, or find a better way that could meet both needs. So hopefully that's helpful.
And Buffy, I appreciate your knowledge and your sharing of, because it once again, it's going back to building a relationship and thinking beyond the dominant culture, thinking for the best interests of Indian children and the tribe's wishes. Certain tribes do not believe in severing parental rights, but they're willing to do a permanency with a guardianship. So it's those little pieces that you need to look into to find avenues to help navigate some really challenging roads that you may be on in working within Indian country and tribes and families. And so thanks, Buffy. I do appreciate you so. Okay, I'm going to go ahead and I will get a printout of any other questions, and I will, between Lainie and I, will try and get back to you and answer questions, and know that our time is coming to an end, and I have a video that I would like to show you, and it's called "We Shall Remain." This video is very close to me because it shows the resilience and what tribes are doing within their own tribes now. And the youth on this video, I know many of them because they're from the Kalispel tribe, they're from the Coeur d'Alene tribe, and it's made on the Coeur d'Alene reservation. And I'm gonna have Ryan cue it up, and after the video, I just have a few parting words. And Lainie, I'm so honored to have done this training with you today. And Ryan, if you would be so kind to show the people on this, "We Shall Remain."
One morning I woke up and I heard my brother crying. He was screaming so loud you thought someone was dying. "Mom, Dad," he screamed, but there was no use trying. They weren't around. I ran outside and saw he'd had a pretty bad crash. His bike was in the ditch, down his arm a bloody gash. He looked so pitiful, just sitting there in the dirt amongst the trash, crying, "I want Mom and Dad." I picked him up and started running toward my uncle's up the way. It started raining and got real dark. He could barely tell it was day. My brother cried and asked, "Sister, where's Mom?" I didn't know what to say, when the truth is, I don't know. When my uncle saw us coming, he ran into the yard. He took my brother from me and he held him in his arms. When he saw my face, I could tell he was alarmed. And he said, "What happened? Did you fall too?" "Uncle, I'm so tired of wondering why. Why do they drink? Why do they do drugs? Why do they leave us? Why?" He said, "Sister, it's hard to explain." And I said, "Uncle, try." And then he told this story.
Once this land was teepees as far as you can see. The water was clean, the land pristine. We were where we were meant to be. Then strangers came across the sea and brought with them their disease. Our people cried and prayed and sang, but it brought them to their knees.
We will rise up from the darkness. We will overcome the pain. Warrior spirits live within us. We shall remain.
Imagine that your family, and most of all your tribe, what if most of everyone you love suddenly got sick and died? And before you even had a chance to bury them and mourn, the strangers came and took away the land where you were born. And you wondered if your parents even cared as they stole you and your brother away, or if they'd been so beaten down they had nothing left to say. And then at school, they cut your hair and beat you if you spoke. The language that Creator gave our people when earth awoke.
We will rise up from the darkness. We will overcome the pain. Warrior spirits live within us. We shall remain.
Sister, I'm not trying to tell you that your mom and dad are okay, or that they are not responsible for the choices that they've made. But you see this bloody wound on your little brother's arm. If we don't clean it, it won't heal and it'll do all kinds of harm. Those deep wounds of our ancestors still bleed within our hearts. When we remember all they've done, that's where the healing starts. So every morning when you wake, you pray this prayer out loud. Creator, help me live in a way that would make my ancestors proud.
We will rise up from the darkness.
Don't you forget this. You can be anything you want to be.
We will overcome the pain.
Just work hard, never give up. Perseverance is the key.
Warrior spirits live within
Strength,
us.
dignity, honor, that's all in your family tree. So hold your head up high and know that.
We shall remain. We will rise up from the darkness.
Creator, help me live in a way that will make my ancestors proud.
We will overcome the pain.
Creator, help me live in a way that will make my ancestors proud.
Warrior spirits live within us.
Creator, help me live in a way that will make my ancestors proud.
We shall remain.
Little brother, we will rise up from the brother, we will overcome the pain. Remember, warrior spirits live within us. We shall remain.
You're muted, Laura.
I think sometimes people would like me muted, but just Lainie, thank you so much. Your input has been beautiful. And again, Buffy, thank you for your stories and your sharing and your heart. And everybody else that has listened since the beginning of this ICWA Institute, and know that this is just the beginning of some of your journeys into being a great advocate for American Indian children. And I want to thank Ryan. You're just so heartfelt when it comes to supporting Indian tribes and Indian people and the continued work within our programs here in the state of Washington. I do appreciate you and honor everything that you do for us. Thank you to Casey Looney and for Lori Irwin and all those who have helped put this together. I am just honored to have this dream of mine come to fruition, to be where we're at today. I mean, Zoom, woo, talk about that. I do want to leave you with something that Wilma Mankiller, who was the principal chief of the Cherokee Nation, she is no longer with us, but I had the honor of being able to be in her presence 2 times and know that a conversation between her and I, and she told me one time that to be a buffalo, she told this story about cows, how they will look at a storm and they will run. They will run away from a storm. But be the strong, powerful buffalo that is in you, Laura Lee, and know that buffaloes will run towards the storm. So I encourage you all to be a buffalo and run towards the storms that you may face, not only with working within Indian communities and with with the law, but just in life in general. Changes will not happen unless your voice is spoken. So tomorrow, so thank you, I honor you. And I want to remind you, tomorrow, we have one of those people who has survived. She is the first Native American Supreme Court Justice here in the state of Washington. Justice Raquel Montejo Lewis will be with us tomorrow to share her journey with you all. And I'm beside myself with excitement and honored to have her with us on our very last day of this institute. So thank you, Ryan, for helping make this come about. And if there's nothing else, I have nothing. Lainie, is there anything you would like to add?
I just want to thank you for including me and allowing me to participate. And thank you for everybody spending your morning listening to us. Thank you, Buffy, for all the amazing stories you're able to share. I swear you have a story for every situation. I'm going to start hitting you up for stories and insight on some things. But just, yeah, thank you, everybody, for allowing us to use your time this morning. I really appreciate it.
Thank you. See you tomorrow.